2020 was a hurricane season like no other.
What a relentless season. 30 named storms. That's the most we've recorded in 170 years of record keeping.
We're taking lessons learned.
We can help you get out safely.
And getting ready for 2021.
My concern every season is that we're going to get hit directly by the eye of a hurricane.
This is our second now hurricane season in the midst of a global pandemic.
People need to prepare now. Don't wait until July or August.
We have what you need to know, from the forecasts to evacuation tips and stories of hurricane heroes. This is AccuWeather's special presentation, Hurricane Season 2021. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jeff Cornish. While some communities are still recovering from the record-breaking 2020 hurricane season, the new hurricane season is underway. We'll look at expectations for what will likely be an active 2021 season. We'll hear from people doing new things to better prepare others and more. Now, before we discuss this year's hurricane season, let's look back at the main highlights of last year's historic season, which in total produced 30 named storms. Marvin Gomez has the details.
Before the start of hurricane season, the Atlantic Basin produced two tropical storms. Arthur formed on May 16th and Bertha on May 27th. Once the season officially began in June, Cristobal came ashore in Louisiana. On June 10th, Faye made landfall in New Jersey. In July, Gonzalo became the earliest ever G-storm in the satellite era. Hanna became the first hurricane of the season and impacted South Texas. August began with Hurricane Isaias hitting the East Coast, causing at least a dozen fatalities and multiple tornadoes. Later on, Marco weakened as it neared the Louisiana coast, but a larger threat was right behind. Major Hurricane Laura made landfall 3 days later. More than 40 deaths were reported. In September, Sally crossed Florida and came ashore in Alabama as a hurricane. Alpha became the year's first Greek-named storm, followed by Beta, which struck Texas on August 21st. On October 9th, Delta became yet another landfalling storm to impact Louisiana. 19 days later, Louisiana took another hit by major Hurricane Zeta. The last cyclones of the season were Eta and Iota in November. Both made landfall as major hurricanes in Nicaragua 13 days apart. Eta made its way north and had two separate Florida landfalls. Overall, 30 cyclones were produced from May to November. For AccuWeather, I'm Marvin Gomez.
Well, joining us today, we have AccuWeather's expert senior meteorologist and hurricane lead forecaster, Dan Kotlowski. And Dan, we just wrapped up a pretty wild 2020 hurricane season. Doesn't feel like it was that long ago. What will you remember the most from that year?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing I remember was Hurricane Laura, just tracking it. So it kind of island hopped and then became the worst hurricane that we probably had for the season as far as damage was concerned. But just the fact that we had so many storms in October and especially two hurricanes in November, very, very unheard of, just made the season very long, very trying, but extremely interesting.
And as we look ahead to the next 6 months or so, what do you expect from the 2021 hurricane season?
Well, we're expecting another active season, maybe not nearly as active as last year, but we're expecting, again, 16 to 20 storms. Of those storms, 7 to 11 will be hurricanes and 3 to 5 major hurricanes. Also, we expect about 3 to 5 impacts, direct impacts, those would be landfalls on the United States and Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. So this again is going to be a very active season. All the variables that were in place last year are very close this year as well.
And Dan, meteorologists are passionate people. We love what we do. We love what we study. And along with that, sometimes we get strong opinions. Are there any hurricane myths that drive you nuts that you would like to dispel?
I think the biggest myth that I think recently that I've seen is when people look at the cone of uncertainty, that cone only tells us what the track is. It doesn't tell us what the actual impacts are. You can have a storm go right through the middle of the cone, but you can still have massive impacts outside of that cone. We can't state enough times that people need to prepare now. Don't wait until July or August when there's a warning out or there's a storm already bearing down on your locality. Now's the time to get everything in order, get your plan in order.
Well, we want to bring in a familiar face for many of you who have tuned in over the hurricane seasons in the past. Here is Ken Graham, the director of the National Hurricane Center. And Ken, thanks for sharing your time with us here today.
Oh, glad to do it. Thanks for getting the word out today.
Well, we're glad to do that as well. Before we look ahead to 2021, what lessons did you and your staff at the National Hurricane Center learn about the 2020 season?
The 2020 season, you look back at it, what a relentless season. 30 named storms. I mean, a record. That's the most we've recorded in 170 years of record keeping. So it just was a relentless season. It just, it didn't end till all the way into November with so many storms.
What would you say to somebody who has never experienced a hurricane and they're about to spend their first hurricane season in, say, Houston, or maybe somebody recently moved to Florida?
Here's the big advice if you haven't been through these systems before. One, take them serious. And I think that's one major factor, is to really take these serious, because it's not just a short-term event. They get here, they get out of here. I mean, some of those impacts could last for weeks in some of the bigger storms. In the end, it's about giving people the information they need to make big decisions, the emergency managers, and all of us sharing that information. Everything that we have, we do everything we can to, that you and I talking, we talk to you all, the media, we do briefings with emergency managers. It's converting all that science and all those observations into something that's actionable. I think there's a huge advancement on how we communicate the dangers and separating those impacts. That's come a long way too, and I think that's a big part of us being able to save lives.
As we gear up for the 2021 hurricane season, many communities along the Gulf Coast are still recovering from last year. We head to Louisiana next. Louisiana was hit harder and more frequently than any other part of the nation, and many are still in the cleanup process after last year's hurricanes. Our Kim Luffler has a look at the progress people there are making as they prepare for this year.
Many Louisiana residents are still picking up the pieces months after Hurricanes Laura and Delta slammed into the state, leaving a trail of destruction behind.
There's still a lot of tarps on roofs from both hurricanes. Tarps have about a lifespan of 3 months.
The storms causing $12 to $14 billion in damage, with Southwest Louisiana seeing the greatest impacts.
If you would have told me a couple days after Laura that we would be where we are today, 8 months later, I don't know if I would have believed you. Because some of the earliest estimates, it couldn't even be spoken, because the earliest estimates were just so dire.
Lake Charles Mayor Nick Hunter says lessons learned from Hurricane Rita 15 years earlier helped recovery efforts move more quickly for these storms.
We had pre-positioned contracts in 2020 that we didn't have back in 2005. So after the hurricanes, our debris removal contractors came in immediately because they were already stationed. They already had their men and their equipment ready to come in.
He says because of that planning, the city has been able to remove nearly 3 times as much debris as they did in the year after Hurricane Rita. He also says buildings in the area are being built stronger to better withstand a storm.
The buildings that are coming back, the roofs that are being put on, the drainage ordinances that are being followed, those are advanced and more progressed than they were 20 years ago.
But there's still work to be done, and a big concern for both government officials and relief organizations like All Hands and Hearts still on the ground in Louisiana is funding.
Our funding is set to run out in August. So at that time, we will have to leave unless we find more funding, which we are very hopeful for.
We still have a long road of recovery ahead of us. We are very concerned that we have not received any federal allocation of disaster recovery dollars, but we're still very proud to be where we are today.
An area still battered, but doing what they can to prepare for whatever may lie ahead. For AccuWeather, I'm Kim Luffler.
We always discuss the importance of creating an evacuation plan for your family, but don't forget your furry family members too. Coming up, a celebrity dog trainer shares some tips. While Louisiana faced the greatest United States impacts in 2020, the city of New Orleans escaped the worst of the storms. But city officials are not letting their guard down. AccuWeather's Bill Waddell shows us how volunteers and new technology will be used to keep families safe.
We are heeding to that warning that hurricane season this year will start just a little bit sooner.
New Orleans leaders say they'll be ready earlier than normal after 2020's record-breaking hurricane season.
This is our second now hurricane season in the midst of a global pandemic. And we were in the cone of uncertainty 8 times on last year. And of course, a direct hit by Hurricane Zeta.
Hundreds of volunteers are training to help with the city-assisted evacuation program, making sure people facing transportation, medical, and financial issues are able to get out of the city if a mandatory evacuation is ordered.
We estimate that roughly 35,000 to 40,000 New Orleanians will be unable to leave on their own in the event of a mandatory evacuation.
There are 17 EvacuSpot pickup locations around the city. Evacuees will be taken to the Smoothie King Center, then sent to shelters out of the city.
This plan is an option of last resort.
Emergency officials say they've learned lessons from COVID-19, and they need more people willing to help their neighbors.
There is a silver lining to this pandemic that we're getting through, and that is we have seen an amazing amount of people helping people in this city with the testing and now the vaccines and now hurricane season. And we're using those volunteers. We're asking them, if you're willing to take the step to help your neighbor, to help your family, and help your friends through COVID, take one step further and help us with hurricane season, because we know after 8 times last year alone, we need it.
City leaders are encouraging people in New Orleans to download the Smart 911 app and register ahead of time if they may need help with a mandatory hurricane evacuation. They also say everyone who lives in a coastal area who is eligible should get the COVID-19 vaccine. For AccuWeather, I'm Bill Waddell.
And when a tropical storm or hurricane might be coming your way, it's important to have a plan in place for you and your family. But don't forget your pets. AccuWeather's Andy Victor explored some ways you can keep your animals safe.
When hurricanes approach, you may be asked to evacuate.
If it isn't safe for you and you need to evacuate, then your pets also need to evacuate.
Before you evacuate, make sure to grab your pet and their emergency preparedness kit. The Humane Society, a nonprofit that focuses on animal welfare, recommends having a kit ready several days before a hurricane is expected to make landfall. It comes in handy if you have to bring your pet to a shelter.
Certainly with hurricanes, we have more planning time than with tornadoes. So you want to make sure that you've got a crate available for every animal and a leash if it's a leash animal. That you have all of their food and water.
Diane Robinson is their disaster services manager. She says livestock should also be evacuated from ranches before a storm. If any large animals have to stay behind, avoid leaving them in barns, which could easily get destroyed from strong winds.
We recommend that you put identifiers on them. So using a grease pen, you can write your phone number on those animals.
In some cases, you may have to shelter in place at home. Victoria Stillwell has over 20 years of experience training dogs. She says to have a familiar place prepared for them in a basement or somewhere away from windows.
Go down there when there aren't storms. So it doesn't become, oh, here we go to the storm room. Go down there and hang out. Let your dog go into the crate when it's just a normal, lovely sunny day.
Dogs and cats may have fearful reactions to the sound of heavy rain or flying debris. Stillwell says to be present in those moments.
We're emotionally attached to our dogs. We love them and we don't want them to suffer. So we will start getting stressed, but take a few deep breaths, go over to your dog, just be with your dog.
If necessary, pet owners should evacuate with their pets. Knowing where pet-friendly shelters are ahead of time can help keep them safe. For AccuWeather, I'm Andy Victor.
As tropical storms and hurricanes hit and leave a mess behind, waste removal is a top priority. As Lincoln Riddle found out, the process is more challenging than it seems.
It's been 9 months since Hurricane Laura ripped through Lake Charles, Louisiana. So far, teams have removed more than 4 million cubic yards of storm waste from the city. As potentially toxic waste piles up in neighborhoods and on yards, waste removal is necessary after any hurricane, but it's not without its challenges.
People want it gone as quickly as possible. after disaster, everyone wants everything to go back to normal. So it's a balance between getting debris removed quickly and getting debris removed responsibly.
From down trees to home appliances, storm debris comes in many forms. Because of this, it usually doesn't end up in the same landfill as your everyday garbage.
There are landfills that are designed to handle just municipal solid waste. There are other special permitted landfills for construction and demolition debris, for example.
Alessandra Girolaman, associate professor of emergency management with Jacksonville State University, says when a major storm hits, states often relax regulations in order to build emergency landfills, which can accommodate all types of storm waste.
These sites end up having these giant mountains of waste. There's an effort made to sort that, but while you're waiting in the interim, you've got waste that could be leaching contaminants into the soil, into the groundwater. You've got other environmental impacts depending on what's being released into the air.
As the waste is sorted, Girolaman says what happens to it from here depends on state regulation.
What's typical is that you'll see some kinds of debris that can go for burning or composting. Wood gets chipped down, turned into mulch, right? So you'll see that pile come down as those kinds of debris are dealt with.
But before the potentially contaminated storm waste even makes it to a landfill, homeowners are left dealing with removal on an individual level. FEMA recommends separating storm debris by category and placing it curbside for pickup. Reporting for AccuWeather, I'm Lincoln Riddle.
When we return, we hear how one volunteer group is preparing to help this hurricane season as the COVID-19 pandemic continues. As the pandemic continues, the disaster response organization of celebrity chef Jose Andres, called World Central Kitchen, is gearing up for what could be another active hurricane season. AccuWeather's Monica Danielle has the story.
World Central Kitchen is the disaster response organization created by celebrity chef Jose Andres.
It's not about us sort of parachuting in from the outside and saying, here's your answer, here's your solution, but rather getting on the ground and listening to the needs.
It's been around for a decade, but it was Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico where they learned that food isn't just a necessity, but also a powerful tool to help heal communities in crisis.
And we gathered together chefs and food trucks and built this operation where we were producing and delivering over 150,000 fresh meals a day.
World Central Kitchen monitors the globe for severe weather conditions and other potential disasters, then deploys teams in advance to connect with locals and figure out the best ways to help feed those in need. The onset of the pandemic forced them to adjust emergency response operations, which Moog says they're making a routine part of their blueprint this year.
Not only to keep our team safe, to make sure that we're following very strict protocols, to make sure that we're able to do our job without getting sick or getting other folks sick, but also just the nature of how you provide food. Everything has to be individually packaged. There are no congregate sort of meal settings where people come together and eat together.
Moog says COVID-19 has added an additional complication to the hurricane season landscape.
We've lost so many jobs in this country. Folks have really had a tough time over the past year, and that means they don't necessarily have the income to be able to leave in the event of an evacuation of an oncoming hurricane.
But he says World Central Kitchen is ready for the challenge.
I expect we're going to have a pretty active hurricane season again, unfortunately, as the waters warm up and as the storms get bigger, so we have to be prepared.
For AccuWeather, I'm Monica Danielle.
How do we communicate as deaf people when our phone dies and we can't do text, we can't, send out messages? I think now it's better. These situations now with planning is much better, and this training is very, very helpful.
Preparing for a hurricane is a stressful situation for anyone, especially for people living with disabilities. Coming up, we hear how one city is making sure everyone is safe. Not only are floods the most common natural disasters in America, but the chances of flooding in your community can change over time. Some people live or work in properties at risk of flooding, and some may not even know it. AccuWeather's Emmy Victor spoke with the organizations working to bring you that information.
Whether you live in New York or California, flooding has likely taken place somewhere near your home.
98% of counties in the U.S. have had properties that have had a flood claim.
Jeremy Porter is the founder of the First Street Foundation, a nonprofit organization. Through their free online database, Flood Factor, people can see whether their property is in an area at high risk of flooding.
What's your likelihood of getting hit with by a 1 in 2 year event, something like a high tide event or a fairly regular heavy rainfall event or something like that, all the way up to a 1 in 500 year event, which would be stronger than Superstorm Sandy, for instance, in the New York area.
Another free resource, the Heartland Flood Help, has property data on 5 Midwest states.
The number of flood-related disasters, particularly in the Midwest, has increased substantially, and the financial impact of those disasters has grown significantly as well.
David Bonebrake, who helped launch the project, says the need for this data is critical in today's climate.
Low risk doesn't equal no risk. So a lot of people are in flood zones that are designated as low risk by FEMA, when in reality there is a risk. It may not be substantial, but we know of places like Harris County, Texas, after Hurricane Harvey, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, in multiple occasions. They've seen significant flooding in areas that are considered low risk.
These organizations hope their information can help property owners make wiser decisions about flood insurance and better prepare for severe weather. For AccuWeather, I'm Emmy Victor.
AccuWeather's partner, KTRK's chief meteorologist Travis Herzog, joined us from Houston, Texas to tell us what his area is most concerned about this season.
My concern every season is that we're going to get hit directly by the eye of a hurricane. And the reason that concerns me every year is because Houston's population is both growing and very transient. We're always concerned about not just the impacts to health, lives, and property, but what happens to the economy and the environment with all of the chemical plants that we have in the Houston Ship Channel. We are very vulnerable to a catastrophic surge coming up Galveston Bay that would then force its way into the Ship Channel where we have all those petrochemical plants. And it's one of the most vital ports to our country. So there's never a specific threat we're concerned about. Like we're pretty sure that we're going to get hit by this. It's more the what if we do get hit by that big one. And every year that's a possibility. No matter if it's just a tropical storm, tropical depression, we know that those can cause catastrophic damage in terms of the flooding potential that we have here along the upper Texas coastline. So it doesn't matter the strength, the intensity, we are always on high alert to be prepared for any tropical weather system. Even a no-name system can cause serious problems here in Southeast Texas.
A major storm with a mandatory evacuation is a stressful situation for anyone, especially for people living with disabilities and their families. AccuWeather's Bill Waddell shows us the plan to keep everyone safe in one of the most vulnerable cities in the nation.
In a city surrounded by water and tested by catastrophic storms, hurricane preparedness is a top priority.
There are thousands of individuals in our city that are going to have trouble getting out in case of a mandatory evacuation.
New Orleans public health and safety officials are putting their plans to the test, running a small-scale exercise of their city-assisted evacuation program.
For our homebound individuals, for our individuals on dialysis, those in wheelchair, those with chronic medical needs, it's going to be even more difficult to evacuate safely.
Carl Arredondo helped volunteers at the drill. He knows all too well about the need for extra storm preparedness for people living with disabilities. He was the only local meteorologist on TV in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. Years later, he started losing his vision and made the decision to step down as chief meteorologist at WWL-TV in 2019.
Take 2 toilet paper tubes, put them to your eyes, and walk around like that for a while.
That's kind of what retinitis pigmentosa, you only have a central vision.
His new job is helping people with limited vision learn to travel safely and independently. He shared those same lessons with these volunteers who are training to help people get to an evacuation hub, then get on a bus or a plane to evacuate the city.
People don't realize it, but a lot of the directions is, go to the line over there. Well, if we can't see, we don't know where over there is. Use clock face. I told one of the volunteers, tell me that we're heading towards my 1 o'clock.
I know in the last couple of years, they've had a lot of frustration with that, and this is an opportunity to rectify it.
Richie Fresnio also helped at the drill, offering feedback to volunteers, assisting people who are deaf or have hearing loss.
How do we communicate as deaf people when our phone dies and we can't do text, we can't, send out messages? These situations now with planning is much better, and this training is very, very helpful.
Richie and American Sign Language interpreter Jennifer Guerreri both say early warnings and clear messages are crucial.
No one gets left out. Make sure you're communicating with everyone.
If we know who you are and where you are and what your needs are, we can help you get out safely.
In New Orleans, for AccuWeather, I'm Bill Waddell.
We want to make sure our network is up and people can use their own cell phones and their own computers and their own communications that they have at home to work on our network as it would be on any normal day.
As hurricanes bring down cell phone towers, power lines, and more, we find out how communications are restored to help keep you connected to your loved ones after a storm.
When a hurricane hits, you have to know how to keep yourself safe. Hurricanes are often forecast well in advance, giving you plenty of time to find safe shelter. Never go outside during a hurricane. Winds can be anywhere from 74 to over 157 miles per hour, with a great deal of airborne debris. It's best to evacuate the area. If you do stay home, make sure that it can withstand the force of a hurricane. In a one-story home, the best places to be are bathrooms or closets near the center of the house, away from doors and windows. In a two-story home, the strongest wall is often a closet or cubicle near the stairwell on the ground floor. Make sure your shelter can accommodate all members of your household. If there is any risk of storm surge flooding for your location, you should leave when told to evacuate. Flooding is the leading cause of fatalities during hurricanes. If you live in a boat or mobile home, evacuate as soon as possible. A hurricane can be at peak strength as it hits land and may take you and your boat with it.
Hurricanes can bring down communication systems, creating a challenge for operators as they race to get their networks back online. We spoke with Verizon on how they respond to hurricanes to help communities get reconnected.
As the storm hits, we have our folks staged in, in safe areas. And then as we work with the government officials, be it federal, local, state, when they say it's safe for us to go in, that's when our signal is. We have a host of technology and tools that we bring to the table whenever we have to respond to a situation. It's almost kind of like a farmyard, we call it, because you hear about things like cows and colts and goats, and really like a cow stands for cell on wheels, and a colt stands for a cell on light truck, and a goat is a truck that has generators on it. And we bring all of these portable assets into an affected area, if a tornado or a hurricane, and we are able to turn these assets up quickly to say if a tower was blown over or if it was flooded and rendered inoperable, we can bring these temporary cell sites to the location and bring temporary service up for people in that area. First and foremost is we want to make sure our network is up and people can use their own cell phones and their own computers and their own communications that they have at home to work on our network as it would be on any normal day. So that's mission one. But sometimes when things are broken beyond repair and when they're in the middle of repair, we have assets that we can bring in to help the community that will allow people to charge their phones, that will allow them to make phone calls from satellite, and just so people can communicate and let their loved ones know that they're safe.
When hurricanes are in the forecast, AccuWeather has the tools to keep you updated in real time. We'll show you several ways to stay informed with AccuWeather's help when we return. We've been hearing it from government officials and forecasters. Now is the time to prepare by having a hurricane plan. AccuWeather's Emmy Victor spoke with our preparation expert to get the specifics.
After an active 2020 Atlantic hurricane season, AccuWeather meteorologist and preparation expert Tom Bedard says to expect another busy season.
A lot of the talk about this year's hurricane season will be whether or not La Nina comes back halfway through the season and gives us another good, intense, very frequent spell of storms.
Like others, Bedard agrees now is the time to make a hurricane safety plan. Make sure to research and find nearby shelters if you have to evacuate.
I would always recommend having a really sturdy backpack, something that you can use, carry with you. You're not going to mind if you have to walk around with it or take it to a shelter with you, and have some good, comfortable clothes with you.
Bedard says there's action to take after a hurricane makes landfall as well.
As soon as the storm passes and it's safe to do so, if you have damage, report it to the National Weather Service. It's critical to have that data in there, also for insurance claims.
The AccuWeather app and AccuWeather Hurricane Tracker are two of the many products that can help you, your family, and your colleagues stay updated and safe in real time.
We have a whole portal built out for businesses so that nobody gets caught off guard by a hurricane, which is important, making sure that your employees can get to safety in time.
Having a plan is a small investment that will pay off and keep everyone safe through the season. The official end to the hurricane season is November 30th. For AccuWeather, I'm Emmy Victor.
And during this hurricane season, there will be a new feature coming to your AccuWeather app with real-time life-saving updates.
When hurricanes are in the forecast, AccuWeather has the tools to keep you updated in real time. The local hurricane tracker optimizes user safety and awareness when tropical storms and hurricanes will impact your location. You will be able to plan effectively and make life-saving decisions such as evacuating if necessary.
Ahead of the storm, the user is informed with start and end times for any tropical rain or wind impacting their location. When the hurricane begins to impact the location, we transition into a live mode where wind speeds and rainfall forecasts are updated throughout the duration of the storm to keep the users aware of the impacts as the storm is occurring. And then when the storm is over, the local experience is removed, but the hurricane tracker will continue for the life cycle of the hurricane.
Some of these features include the AccuWeather Forecast iPath map that shows a storm's risk to life and property and informs you on how to prepare for any and all upcoming impact.
When there's a hurricane threat to our users, we want them to feel confident and have awareness around how that hurricane will impact their location and how they can plan safely for any impacts that may be coming their way. And so really it's about bringing superior accuracy into hurricane tracking.
And the AccuWeather Local Hurricane Tracker is already available on AccuWeather.com. The tracker will be coming soon to the AccuWeather app. You can download the app using the QR code on the screen. The app will provide additional features like the exclusive AccuWeather Forecast iPath map, which offers you a 7-day look at a storm's strength and its movement. The U.S. Census Bureau says more than 94 million people live in coastline counties. That's nearly 30% of America's population. Construction in hurricane zones calls for sturdy homes and businesses that can withstand 100-mile-per-hour winds. AccuWeather's Bill Waddell shows us why some builders are turning to old shipping containers and why others won't.
From the quiet beach towns along the Gulf Coast to the heart of Houston, there are a handful of homes that stand out from the rest. A pair of houses built from shipping containers turn heads on the drive into Port O'Connor, Texas, a community hit hard by 4 hurricanes since the early 1900s. In Houston's 3rd Ward, one man used 11 old containers to build his dream home, 2,500 square feet, creating a 3-story fortress with a roof deck overlooking the city.
It's just an incredible opportunity because they're also an affordable building material.
Sean Krieger is another builder who believes in the benefits of reusing shipping containers.
So it's not something that's just outlandish and only for the wealthy, but something that you really could adopt on virtually every coastal city in America.
He's created several affordable housing units in Houston for lower income families. Down the street, he built this community housing project.
The main reason why people book is because they read the name container home. So it's like, oh man, I want to check that out.
Josh Molina works and lives here. He says these giant steel boxes are sturdy, and he'd feel safe here if a tropical storm or hurricane was headed this way.
I would probably say here, yeah. Maybe this area right here tends to flood. I'm sure this house can take it. Can take the wind and everything else.
These containers are built to withstand storms out on the open ocean, but builders tell us they're facing a growing list of challenges trying to use these in construction projects.
A lot of companies thought, well, we'll build one and we'll get the hang of it and then things will go better, the jurisdictions will do better, and they never do. The banks don't want to finance them, permitting doesn't want to deal with it.
There are success stories around the nation. Work is wrapping up on Box 500 apartments in Salt Lake City, Utah. The 6-story complex, built with used shipping containers, will have 83 apartments. In other parts of the country, construction using old shipping containers has essentially been banned. Sean Krieger hopes more community and industry leaders will take a second look at container homes and how traditional homes have stood up against hurricane-force winds.
If that guy wants to go build a container house in the neighborhood, just let them do it. Let's just see what happens. And when the hurricane comes through, they can put their houses against mine and we'll just see who comes out on top. And if I don't, well, shoot, you got what you wanted, the house is gone.
For AccuWeather, I'm Bill Waddell.
With the official start of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season underway, we take a look at AccuWeather's exclusive hurricane season forecast next. And here is another look at the official AccuWeather hurricane season forecast for the Atlantic Basin. We do expect this to be an above average season for activity with 16 to 20 named storms. Remember, last year we had 30, which was an incredible season. We do expect 7 to 10 hurricanes this year, 3 to 5 major hurricanes, and the accumulated cyclone energy index, which is a single statistic that characterizes the strength and longevity of a season's storms, added all up, will likely be a bit above average, between 120 and 160 units, and likely 3 to 5 direct U.S. landfalls among tropical storms and hurricanes. And this is a marathon. The Atlantic hurricane season runs 6 months, June through November. But there is a big crescendo here. August, September 10th is the peak. October, we're into the autumn season by then, but the water is still relatively warm in October. It's still a very active month. And here's a look at the 2021 Atlantic storm name list. We have 21 letters in the English alphabet represented here. And if we do have a 22nd named storm, whether that be this year or any year in the future, instead of using the Greek alphabet, we'll be using the new supplemental list. And we used the Greek alphabet name list in 2005 and 2020. But this is the new standard operating procedure replacing the old Greek name list. Remember, it only takes one storm to forever change a community, and many of you tuning in have great responsibility in the safety of your family. Stay connected to us all season here through the AccuWeather Network, the AccuWeather app at AccuWeather.com. Be safe and enjoy the summer.
Now's the time to get everything in order, get your plan in order. Don't assume that you know what's going on. If you've said, oh, I've lived here for 20 years, things change. Buildings change, routes change. So get yourself up to date as to what the emergency management people say as far as evacuation, and again, as far as what you need to do to prepare.
The very first step you have to do is know your risk. If you're in right along the coast, if you're in evacuation zone, please know your zone. If you're in that storm surge area, those are the areas that get evacuated when it comes to the storm surge. Storm surge being the most deadly part of these tropical systems historically is a leading cause of fatality. So know your zone, know your risk, get that information early, talk to your neighbors, get informed. I think that's one of the biggest things that you can do. Take it serious, and now's the time to do it.